The HSS Perseverance was a joke, and everyone in the Terran Navy knew it. She was 100 years old, and she looked every day of it. Her hull was covered in patches and welding marks from 17 different battles that she had no business surviving. Her reactor made strange sounds that no engineer could explain. Her weapon systems ran on software so old that Academy students used it as an example of what not to do. 3 times the Navy had scheduled her for the scrapyard, and 3 times something had come up to save her. Once it was budget cuts that meant they could not afford to replace her. Once it was a clerical error that lost her paperwork. And once the admiral in charge simply forgot she existed. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of this ancient ship and looked at the orders on her screen. The Dominion of Kethva had declared war on humanity, and every ship in the fleet had received deployment commands. The great carriers were heading to the front lines. The battleships were forming defensive positions around Earth. The destroyers and cruisers were escorting convoys and protecting colonies. Perseverance was assigned to patrol the Hollow Reaches. Vasquez almost laughed when she read it. The Hollow Reaches were a vast stretch of empty space at the very edge of the galaxy. Nothing was there. No planets worth colonizing, no resources worth mining. No strategic value whatsoever. It was the kind of assignment you gave to a ship you wanted to forget about. She looked around her bridge at the crew she had been given. Lieutenant Okonkwo sat at the navigation console. He was brilliant with computers, but he had a habit of telling superior officers exactly what he thought of their decisions. That habit had gotten him transferred 6 times in 4 years. Ensign Reyes handled the sensors. She was fresh out of the academy, and this was her first assignment. Everyone knew what it meant when your first posting was the worst ship in the fleet. It meant someone somewhere had decided your career was already over. Chief Petty Officer Morrison ran the weapon systems. He was 60 years old and had been serving on the Perseverance for 20 of those years. He refused every transfer because he said the ship needed him. More likely, he was afraid no other ship would have him engineering chief. Tanaka kept the reactor running through what she called creative solutions, and what the safety inspectors called violations of 17 different regulations. She had been given a choice after her last review: take the Perseverance or face a tribunal. She chose the ship. These were her people. The misfits and the failures. The ones nobody else wanted crewing a ship nobody else wanted. Set course for the Hollow Reaches. Vasquez said. Nobody argued. Nobody complained. They were used to being forgotten. The journey took 3 weeks, and nothing happened. The Perseverance limped through space at speeds that would have embarrassed a cargo hauler. Her engines complained constantly. Her life support hiccuped twice a day at exactly the same times. Her artificial gravity fluctuated just enough to make everyone slightly nauseous, but she kept going because that was what she did. The Hollow Reaches were exactly as empty as the report suggested. Vasquez ordered standard patrol patterns, and the crew settled into a routine of boredom. They played cards and watched old movies and tried not to think about the war happening without them. Then on the 19th day of patrol, Ensign Reyes found something strange. Captain, she said, her voice uncertain. I am picking up a signal. Vasquez walked over to her station. What kind of signal? I do not know. Reyes tapped her console and frowned. It looks like a distress call, but it is coming from coordinates that should not exist. Okonkwo pulled up the star charts on his screen. She is right. There is nothing at those coordinates. The gravitational readings say there cannot be anything there. The mass distribution is impossible. Probably a sensor ghost, Morrison said from his station. This ship sees things that are not there. Last week she told me we were on fire. Were we? Vasquez asked. Only a little, but the signal kept coming. It pulsed in a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Every few seconds, the same pattern repeated, a cry for help from a place that could not exist. Vasquez made a decision that went against every regulation and all common sense. Take us in, she ordered. The Perseverance changed course and headed toward the impossible coordinates. The closer they got, the stranger the readings became. Space itself seemed to twist around them, the stars. Outside, the viewports started moving in ways that hurt to watch, and then they saw it was a structure, but that word did not feel right. It was the size of a small moon, and it looked like it had been grown rather than built. Its surface was covered in patterns that shifted and changed geometric shapes that had too many angles, spirals that seemed to go inward forever. Colors that did not have names. Vasquez stared at it and felt something she had not felt in years. True, genuine fear, Captain Reyes whispered. There are ships, dozens of them, a full battle group with cruisers and destroyers and support vessels, enough firepower to destroy a planet. They surrounded the structure, and their weapons were firing. Bright lances of energy struck the surface again and again and again. But nothing happened. How long have they been firing? Vasquez asked. Reyes checked her readings 3 times before answering. Based on the weapon heat signatures and energy expenditure patterns, I would estimate at least 3 weeks. 3 weeks of constant bombardment, and the structure did not have a single mark on it. Get us out of here, Vasquez said. Reverse course now. Okonkwo's hands flew across his console. I am trying, Captain. The engines are not responding. The ship lurched forward instead of backward. The structure was pulling them, and its surface rippled like water, and the Perseverance was drawn toward it like a leaf caught in a current. Alarms blared across every station. The crew grabbed whatever they could hold as the ship shook and twisted. The viewport showed the Fubu structure rushing toward them impossibly fast. Then everything went white when Vasquez could see again the Perseverance was inside the structure. The interior was vast beyond comprehension. They floated in a space that seemed to have no walls, no floor, no ceiling, just endless darkness dotted with lights that might have been stars or might have been something else entirely. And then a voice spoke. It did not come through the speakers. It came from everywhere at once. It came from inside their heads. It was older than anything Vasquez had ever heard, and it carried the weight of countless ages. After so long, the voice said, something new, something stubborn. The crew sat frozen at their stations. Nobody moved, nobody breathed, nobody dared to do anything at all. Who are you? Vasquez managed to ask. The voice seemed amused by the question. I am the architect. I built empires before your enemy's ancestors crawled from their seas. I watched civilizations rise and burn themselves to nothing. I grew tired of it all, and I came here to sleep. The darkness around them shifted, and they saw visions, galaxies spinning and dying, worlds being born and destroyed, species rising to greatness and then vanishing like they had never existed at all. But I have been watching your little war, the architect continued, and I find myself interested for the first time in millennia. Vasquez felt the ancient presence focus on her ship, on the patches and the scars and the failing systems, on a vessel that should have been scrapped decades ago, but somehow kept flying. You are weak, the architect said. Your bodies are fragile. Your ships are laughable. Your weapons are primitive. And yet you fight against those who surpass you in every way. Why? Vasquez thought about the question for a long moment. Because we do not have a choice, she finally said. Everyone has a choice. You could surrender. You could run. You could accept your end with grace, as so many have done before. Vasquez looked at her crew, at the misfits and failures who had nowhere else to go. That is not really how humans work, she said. The architect's attention lingered on the Perseverance, on everything that made it the worst ship in the fleet, and somehow Vasquez got the feeling that it was smiling. No, it agreed. I can see that it is not. The Perseverance hung in the endless darkness inside the architect's domain, and the crew waited for whatever would happen. Next, Captain Vasquez stood at the center of her bridge and tried to look calm. Her heart was beating fast, and her hands wanted to shake, but she kept them still. A captain had to appear strong, even when facing something beyond all understanding. The architect's presence filled the space around them. It was everywhere at once, watching and listening and thinking thoughts that no human mind could follow. "I have a question for you, Captain," the ancient voice said. "What do you believe your ship can do?" Vasquez frowned at the strange question. "She can patrol. She can run basic missions. She can fight if she has to, but not against anything serious. Her weapons are outdated. Her shields are weak. Her engines are slow." "That is what the specifications say," the architect replied. "But that is not what I asked. What do you believe she can do?" Before Vasquez could answer, Chief Petty Officer Morrison spoke up from his weapons station. "She can do anything she needs to," he said firmly. "I have been on this ship for 20 years. I have seen her survive things that should have destroyed her. I have watched her guns hit targets they had no business hitting. I know what the manuals say, but the manuals are wrong." Engineering Chief Tanaka nodded from her station. "The reactor should have failed 100 times by now. Every engineer who looks at it says the same thing. It cannot work the way it works, but it does because I believe it will keep working, because I refuse to let it stop." Lieutenant Okonkwo added his voice. "The navigation system is ancient, but I can make it do things the designers never imagined. I know this ship. I know how she thinks. If that makes any sense." Even Ensign Rios, the youngest member of the crew, spoke up. "My instructors told me these sensors were useless, but I trust them. When they show me something, I believe it even when it seems impossible." The architect listened to all of this, and Vasquez felt its interest growing fascinating. It said, "You do not see your ship as the rest of the galaxy does. You see what it could be rather than what it is." The darkness shifted, and suddenly they could see the structure from the outside. They watched as the Kethver battle group continued its useless assault, hundreds of weapons firing without end, thousands of shots that accomplished nothing. "The Dominion has been trying to enter my home for 23 days, the architect explained. "They detected my presence, and they want my technology. They believe that if they can break through my walls, they can take whatever they find inside." "Can they?" Vasquez asked. "No. Their weapons are powerful, but they fight without faith. They calculate and optimize and follow the mathematics of war. They know exactly what their ships can do, and they never push beyond those limits." The vision changed again, and Vasquez saw something that made her breath catch. In her throat, galaxies of conflict stretched before her, millions of years of warfare across thousands of species. Every kind of war imaginable. Elegant battles between crystal beings. Wars fought by machines with no living pilots. Conflicts between hive minds that shared a single consciousness. Struggles between entities made of pure thought. "I have seen every form of combat," the architect said. "I have watched species fight for territory, for resources, for ideology, for survival, and they all become the same. They all optimize, they all calculate. They all remove the chaos and the passion and the madness from their wars, until battle becomes nothing more than mathematics." The visions faded and the architect's attention focused entirely on the Perseverance. "But your kind fights differently. You fight with spite. You win battles you cannot win. You survive through sheer refusal to accept reality. I have not seen anything like it in 60,000 years." Vasquez felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. "What do you want from us?" "Entertainment," the architect said simply. "I am old beyond your comprehension. I have seen everything worth seeing, or so I thought. But you humans have shown me something new. You have reminded me that the universe can still surprise me. And in exchange, I will give your ship a gift." The crew tensed, expecting some kind of weapon to appear or some advanced technology to materialize. But nothing visible happened. The ship looked exactly the same. "I do not understand," Vasquez said. "What did you do?" "I removed the gap." "The gap between what?" "Between what your ship is and what you believe it can be. Your weapons will now hit as hard as your gunner believes they should. Your Shields will hold as long as your crew refuses to let them fail. Your engines will push as fast as your pilot needs them to go. Morrison stared at his console. That is impossible. Is it? The architect sounded amused. Your species has a phrase, I find interesting mind over matter. You say it often, but you do not truly believe it. But what if it were real? What if your conviction could shape reality? Tanaka shook her head. Physics does not work that way. Physics is a set of rules, and rules were made to be broken by those stubborn enough to refuse them. Vasquez tried to process what she was hearing. You are saying that our ship will now work based on how much we believe in it. Precisely, your faith will fuel your power, your stubbornness will shape your strength. The more you believe, the more capable you become. That sounds like magic. It is not magic. It is cognitive resonance. The universe responds to consciousness more than most species realize. Your kind has an unusual gift for imposing your will on reality. You simply never had the tools to make it manifest until now. The architect paused, and when it spoke again, its voice was harder. But there is a condition: you must never stop fighting. You must never become predictable. You must never optimize or calculate or fight the way everyone expects you to. The moment you begin to act like every other species, the moment you start following the mathematics of war, I will take my gift back, and I will be disappointed. Vasquez looked at her crew, at the misfits and failures who had spent their careers doing things the wrong way, who had survived by ignoring rules and trusting their instincts. I do not think that will be a problem, she said. The architect laughed, and the sound was like stars being born. No, I do not think it will be. Go now. There is a war waiting for you, and I want to watch. The darkness around them began to shift. The Perseverance started moving, pulled by forces they could not see or understand. One more thing, the architect added. The Kethvar outside believe they are hunting you. They have detected your presence, and they are waiting for you to emerge. How many ships? Okonkwo asked. 47. The crew exchanged worried looks. 47 warships against one ancient corvette. Even with the architect's gift, those were impossible odds. Good, Vasquez said, and she meant it. The Perseverance burst through the structure's surface and into open space. The Kethvar battle group turned their weapons toward the single human ship that dared to emerge. Morrison's hands moved across his console, and for the first time in years he smiled. Let us show them what this old girl can really do. The Kethvar battle group consisted of 47 warships arranged in a perfect formation. Their commanders looked at the ancient human corvette emerging from the structure, and they laughed. Admiral Velkreth sat on his command throne and watched the readings on his display. The human ship was a century old. Its weapons were outdated by at least 60 years. Its shields could barely stop debris. Its engines were slower than some cargo vessels. One ship, he said to his officers. They send one ship against us. His tactical officer ran calculations. Based on our analysis, the human vessel poses no threat. Its maximum weapons output could not penetrate the shields of even our smallest escort. Their appearance here makes no tactical sense. Perhaps they are surrendering, another officer suggested. Perhaps they wish to negotiate. Velkreth considered this. The structure behind them had resisted everything they threw at it for weeks. Maybe the humans knew something they did not. Maybe they had found a way inside. Open communications, he ordered. We will give them one chance to be useful. The channel opened, and Captain Vasquez's face appeared on the screen. She looked calm, which annoyed Velkreth. Prisoners should look afraid. Human vessel, he said. You have trespassed in Dominion space and interfered with a military operation. Surrender now and tell us what you found inside that structure. If your information is valuable, we may let some of you live. Vasquez tilted her head slightly. That is a generous offer. It is the only offer you will receive. I have a counteroffer. Velkreth's eyes narrowed. You are not in a position to make offers. Leave now. Take your ships and go back to Dominion space. Do not return to the Hollow. Reaches. Do not pursue human vessels. Do not continue this war against Earth. The bridge crew laughed. Velkrith allowed himself a smile at the humans' foolishness, and if we refuse, Vasquez's expression did not change. Then I will destroy every ship. In your fleet. The laughter stopped. Velkrith stared at the screen, trying to understand if this was a joke or a bluff or simple madness. You have one ship, he said slowly. An obsolete corvette with 40 crew members. We have 47 warships. We have thousands of soldiers. We have enough firepower to crack a planet in half. I know, Vasquez said. It hardly seems fair, does it? She cut the communication. Veltrak sat in silence for a moment. Then he gave the order. Destroy them. Every weapon. In the fleet opened fire. Beams of energy and streams of projectiles and missiles beyond counting. All of it aimed at one small ship that should have been vaporized in the first second. The Perseverance dodged, not slowly, not clumsily, not the way a 100-year-old corvette should move. She twisted through the storm of fire like a dancer, like water flowing around stones, like a ship that knew exactly where every shot would land before it was fired. Impossible, the tactical officer whispered. The human ship is exceeding its maximum acceleration by 300%. Its maneuvers are beyond the structural limits of its hull. Then your readings are wrong, Velkrith snapped. Concentrate fire. Pattern Omega-7 20 ships adjusted. Their positions and fired in perfect coordination. A web of destruction that covered every possible escape route. Every angle, every vector. The Perseverance flew straight through a gap that should not have existed. And then she fired back. Morrison sat at his weapons console, and he felt something he had not felt in decades. True pure confidence. He had spent 20 years nursing these old guns. He had learned every quirk and flaw and limitation. He knew exactly what they could not do. But he also knew what they should be able to do, what they would do if the universe was fair, if hard work and dedication meant something, if believing in your equipment actually mattered. His first shot struck a Kethver destroyer and tore through it from front. To back the ship simply came apart. Reactors failed. Bulkheads collapsed. Crew compartments opened to vacuum. In one shot, a vessel that should have required a full bombardment to destroy was reduced to expanding debris. Direct hit, Morrison reported. And his voice was steady, targeting second vessel. The second shot did the same thing. So did the third. So did the fourth. Chaos erupted in the Kethver fleet. Ships broke formation trying to evade. Commanders screamed orders that contradicted each. Other tactical officers threw away their calculations because the calculations were clearly wrong. The Perseverance's ancient guns were suddenly hitting harder than any weapon in the Terran Navy, harder than weapons that existed on any human ship. Each shot carried the weight of Morrison's 20 years of faith in his equipment and his ship, in his own ability. So Conquo flew the ship like it was part of his body. He did not think about speed limits or structural stress or what the engines could actually produce. He simply moved, and the ship moved with him. Faster than any corvette should go, more agile than physics should allow engineering. Chief Tanaka watched her reactor readings climb past every red line on the display, and she did not feel fear. She felt vindication. She had always known this ship had more to give. She had always believed that the numbers were wrong. Now the numbers were changing, shields holding. She reported as enemy fire finally started to land. Power levels. Stable engine output at 400% of rated maximum. 400%. On a reactor that should have failed at 150. Ensign Rios tracked every enemy ship on her sensors. She saw their movements before they made them. She felt their intentions like whispers in her mind. The sensors she had been told were useless were showing her everything. 3 cruisers flanking to port, she called out. 2 destroyers attempting to cut off retreat. 4 more ships charging. Main weapons. Vasquez processed the information instantly. Morrison, take the cruisers. Okonkwo, give us an angle. The ship spun and the guns fired, and 3 cruisers became 3 clouds of debris. The battle lasted less than an hour when it was over. 47 HFY warships had been reduced to floating wreckage. The Perseverance had not taken a single serious hit. Her shields had held against everything. Her weapons had never missed. Her engines had never faltered. Admiral Velcrath died. Still trying to understand what had happened, his last thought was that the readings must have been wrong. That human ships could not do what he had just witnessed. He was right about one thing. The readings were wrong. But the ship was not. Captain Vasquez looked at the destruction around her and felt a strange calm. She should have been shocked. She should have been terrified by what her ship had become. Instead, she felt like something that had always been true had finally been proven. Send a message. To Fleet Command, she ordered. Tell them we engaged an enemy battle group in the hollow. Reaches 47 ships engaged and destroyed. No casualties. They will not believe it. Okonkwo said. They will have to deepen the hollow reaches inside. The impossible structure. The architect watched and laughed. This was going to be fun. The message reached Terran Fleet Command 12 hours after the battle, and it caused complete chaos. Admiral Chun stared at the report and tried to make sense of it. The HSS Perseverance, a 100-year-old corvette. The joke of the fleet, the ship. They sent to the hollow reaches because they did not want it anywhere important. That ship had supposedly destroyed 47 HFY warships without taking any casualties. This is a mistake, he told his staff, or a lie or some kind of enemy. Trick. We have confirmed the debris field, his intelligence officer reported. 47 Dominion vessels, including Admiral Velcrath's flagship. They are all destroyed by one corvette. That is what the message claims. Chun rubbed his temples. The war was not going well for humanity. The HFY had better ships, better weapons, better technology. Human forces were holding the line, but barely. Every engagement cost them dearly. And now someone was telling him that an antique patrol ship had single-handedly won the biggest victory of the war. Get me Captain Vasquez, he ordered. I want to hear this directly from her. The communication took time to establish. The hollow reaches were far from any relay stations. But eventually, Vasquez's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but calm. Not like someone who had just survived an impossible battle. More like someone who had finished a long day of routine work. Captain, Chun said carefully, I have read your report. Yes, Admiral. I do not believe it. Vasquez almost smiled. I understand that is reasonable. You expect me to accept that your ship, the Perseverance, destroyed an entire battle group. You expect me to believe that a vessel we were planning to scrap next year defeated 47 enemy warships. I am not asking you to believe anything. Admiral, I am telling you what happened. Chun leaned forward. Then explain it. How did you do it? Vasquez was quiet for a moment, and Chun could see her thinking, choosing her words. Carefully, we found something in the hollow reaches, she finally said. An ancient structure built by something very old. It gave our ship a gift. A gift. What kind of gift? The kind that makes our weapons hit harder. The kind that makes our shields hold longer. The kind that makes our engines run faster. That is not an explanation, Captain. No. Vasquez agreed. It is not, but it is the truth. Chun wanted to argue, wanted to demand real answers, but he was interrupted by an alert on his console menu. Sensor data, enemy fleet movements. HFY ships converging on the hollow reaches. Hundreds of them. Captain, he said, his voice urgent. The Dominion is sending a response force. Your direction, over 200 warships. Vasquez did not look surprised. Then I should go greet them. That is not, you cannot. Chun struggled to find words. Even if your first victory was real, you cannot fight 200 ships. We will see. Captain, I am ordering you to withdraw. Fall back to Terran space immediately. Vasquez looked at him with something like pity. Admiral, with all respect, I am going to have to decline that order. You cannot decline orders. Then court-martial me later. Right now there is a fleet coming, and I intend to stop it. She cut the communication channel, stared at the blank screen, and felt a headache building behind his eyes. He had just watched the captain openly defy orders, and he had no idea what to do about it. Part of him wanted to send ships after her to arrest her for insubordination, but another part whispered, what if she was right? What if somehow the impossible had become possible? He pulled up the sensor data and watched the enemy fleet approaching the hollow reaches. 231 ships, enough to crush any human force sent against them, and one ancient corvette moving to intercept. God help her, he muttered. The Perseverance met the Dominion fleet at the edge of the hollow reaches. This time there was no communication, no demands for surrender. The Kethver had learned from their last defeat. They came in fast and hard with every weapon ready. 200 ships opened fire simultaneously. Perseverance danced through the barrage. Her shields flared with impacts but held hull twisted and turned, avoiding shots that should have been impossible to dodge. Her engines pushed her faster and faster until she was a blur against the stars. And then she attacked Morrison, fired with a focus that bordered on meditation. He did not think about targets or calculations. He simply knew where each shot needed to go. His gun spoke, and enemy ships Dito Conquo flew with his eyes half closed. He was not watching the battle. He was feeling it. Every enemy movement was a vibration in his mind. Every escape route was a path of light in his imagination. Tanaka watched her reactor climb to outputs that should have melted it down. 500%. 607. She should have been terrified. Instead, she whispered encouragement to the engines, like a mother comforting a child. Reese tracked everything. Her sensors showed her the entire battle in perfect detail. She called out warnings and opportunities, and the crew responded without hesitation. But this time, there were too many. The Perseverance was strong beyond belief, but 200 ships was 200 ships. She could not dodge every shot. She could not destroy them fast enough. Hull breach on deck 4. Tanaka reported, her voice strained. Shields failing on the starboard side. I am losing targeting accuracy, Morrison admitted. There are too many. Vasquez gripped her command chair and felt the ship shuddering around her. They had pushed too far, believed too hard, but reality was finally catching up. Then something strange happened across Terran space. Other ships began to change. The frigate TSS Defiant was escorting a convoy near the border. Her captain was a young woman named Rodriguez, who had followed the Perseverance's story with fascination. She believed every word of it when a Kethvar raider appeared to attack her convoy. Rodriguez ordered an intercept. Her crew expected to die. The Defiant was no match for a raider, but Rodriguez believed they could win. She believed it with everything she had. The Defiant's weapons hit harder than they should have. Her shields held longer than they should have. The raider was destroyed in minutes. The cruiser TSS Indomitable was defending a Mayan colony. Her crew had served together for 15 years. They trusted each other completely. They believed in their ship, the way Morrison believed in the Perseverance. When 3 Kethvar destroyers attacked, they fought back with impossible fury. Their missiles tracked with unnatural accuracy. Their point defense stopped shots that should have gotten through. The destroyers were treated across the fleet. Ships were discovering the same truth. The architect's gift was not limited to one vessel. It was spreading, carried by belief itself. Every crew that heard the Perseverance's story and believed it, every captain who refused to accept limitations, every engineer who knew their ship could do more. The power was waking up everywhere, and in the hollow reaches the Perseverance felt it. Vasquez gasped as new strength flooded through the ship. The shields reformed stronger than before. The weapons recharged faster. The engines pushed harder. What is happening? Okonkwo demanded. Vasquez did not fully understand, but she felt the truth. We are not alone anymore. The battle turned. The Perseverance stopped running and started hunting. 200 Kethvar ships became 150, became 100, became 50. became none. When it was over, the hollow reaches were filled with debris for 1,000,000 kilometers. The Perseverance hung alone in the wreckage, battered but unbroken. Her crew sat at their stations, exhausted beyond words. "Message from Fleet Command," Reyes said weakly. Vasquez laughed. It was the only response that made sense. "Tell them mission accomplished." Word of the Perseverance spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. First it was whispers among human crews. Stories passed between ships during supply runs. Rumors shared in station bars and mess halls. 100-year-old corvette that destroyed entire fleets. A crew of misfits who had become the deadliest force in the Warthen. The Kethver started talking. The Dominion of Kethver had ruled their region of space for 8,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species and absorbed hundreds of worlds. They did not know Fur. No, they were learning Supreme Commander. Zethral sat in his war chamber and listened to his advisors argue. The reports were clear. The human ship designated Perseverance had destroyed 300 of their vessels in 2 engagements. No Dominion force sent against it had survived. The readings must be wrong. One advisor insisted. Our ships are superior. Our technology is superior. One human vessel cannot do what the reports claim. Then explain. The debris fields, another shot back. Explain where 300 ships went. Human trickery, some kind of new weapon. A weapon that makes an obsolete corvette invincible. Zethral raised his hand and silence fell. "I have studied the recordings," he said slowly. "I have analyzed every piece of data we have. The human ship is not using any technology we can identify. It is not deploying weapons we do not understand. Then how? It is exceeding its own capabilities." Zethral's voice was troubled. "Its weapons are hitting harder than physics should allow. Its shields are holding against fire that should destroy them. Its engines are producing thrust beyond any possible output." The advisors stared at him in confusion. "That is impossible, Supreme." "Commander." "Yes," Zethral agreed. "It is, and yet it is happening. The human ship is doing impossible things because it refuses to accept that they are impossible." He pulled up a holographic display showing the Terran fleet. Every ship was marked with updated combat data, and it is not just one ship anymore. The display flickered to show dozens of engagements across the war front. Human ships were winning battles. They should have lost. Frigates were destroying cruisers. Corvettes were holding against battleships. The entire human fleet was changing. They call it the Perseverance effect. Zethral said. Their crews hear the stories, and they believe. The more they believe, the stronger they become. That is madness, an advisor protested. Belief cannot change physical reality. Our dead say otherwise. The war shifted human. Forces that had been struggling to survive began pushing back. Colonies that were about to fall were suddenly defended by ships that fought like demons. Strategic positions changed. Hand's Dominion supply lines were cut, and through it all the Perseverance kept fighting. Captain Vasquez had become a legend, but she did not care about fame. She cared about her crew and her ship and winning the war. The architect had given them a gift, and she intended to use it. The ship that had once been a joke was now the terror of the Dominion Kethver. Commanders learned to dread sensor readings that showed an ancient human corvette. They knew that if the Perseverance found them, they would not survive, but Vasquez knew they could not fight forever. The Dominion is regrouping, she told her crew one evening as they drifted through empty space between missions. Intelligence says they are gathering their entire remaining fleet, every ship they have. How many? Akanko asked. Over 1,000. The crew was quiet. 1,000 ships was a number beyond anything they had faced. Even with the architect's gift, even with the power of belief that was an overwhelming force, they are planning one final push, Vasquez continued. If they can destroy our fleet in a single decisive battle, they think they can still win the war. Can they? Ensign Reyes asked. Vasquez looked at her young sensor officer. The girl had grown so much since they first entered the hollow reaches. She was no longer the uncertain academy graduate who had been dumped on a worse ship in the fleet. None of them were what they had been. They are counting on mathematics, Vasquez said. They believe that numbers must eventually win. They think that if they bring enough firepower, they can overwhelm our belief. Can they? Reyes asked again. What do you think? Reyes was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. I think they do not understand humans at all. The final battle took place in the Kethver home system. The Dominion had gathered everything they had, 1,200 warships, the greatest fleet they had ever assembled, enough firepower to burn 100 worlds. Against them came the Terran fleet. 300 ships supported by the Perseverance. The number said humanity should lose. The mathematics were clear. The calculations showed inevitable defeat. But humanity had stopped caring about mathematics. Captain Rodriguez of the Defiant believed her crew was invincible. She had won 12 engagements since the power awakened in her ship. She knew they would win 12 more. Commander Walsh of the battleship Unconquered believed his guns could crack any shield. He had spent 30 years learning every weakness of Kethver armor. He knew exactly where to hit them. Admiral Chun had stopped doubting. He had watched the impossible happen too many times. He believed in his fleet with a certainty that surprised even himself, and Vasquez believed in all of them. The fleets met, and the universe shook. Human weapons fired with force that broke physics. Shields held against attacks that should have shattered them. Ships moved with speed and grace that made the Kethver commanders weep with frustration. The Dominion fought back with everything they had. They were not weak. They were not cowardly. They were warriors from a proud civilization with 8,000 years of military tradition. It was not enough. The Perseverance cut through the enemy formation. Like a blade, she targeted command ships and supply vessels and communication relays. Everything that held the Dominion fleet together. She destroyed Morrison's guns, never stopped firing. Each shot was a decade of faith given physical form. Okonkwo flew paths through the battle that should have torn the ship apart. The engine screamed but never failed. Tanaka kept power flowing through systems that were melting and breaking and reforming. She had stopped reading the displays because the numbers had stopped meaning anything. Reyes saw everything. Her mind had expanded to encompass the entire battlefield. She was the eyes of the fleet, seeing threats before they emerged, guiding human ships away from danger, and Vasquez commanded it all with the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly how the story would end. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 900 Kethver ships were destroyed. The rest were fleeing in all directions. Their fleet shattered, their morale broken. Suffering. Commander Zethral survived long enough to send one final message to his homeworld. They cannot be beaten. He reported, his voice empty of everything except exhaustion. We brought everything we had against them, and they destroyed us with faith. We are finished. The Dominion surrendered 3 days later. The war was over, and humanity had won. The Perseverance returned to Earth as a hero ship. Crowds gathered to welcome her home. Millions watched as the battered ancient corvette descended through the atmosphere, escorted by the finest vessels in the fleet. Captain Vasquez stood on her bridge and looked at her crew. Morrison was crying silently at his station. 20 years of believing in a ship that no one else believed in finally vindicated. Tanaka was laughing as she ran diagnostics on a reactor that should have been impossibly. Okonkwo was already planning their next mission. There would always be a next mission. Reyes was staring out the viewport at Earth, at the world they had saved. Her first assignment had turned into the greatest adventure in human history. What happens now? She asked. Vasquez considered the question. The architect had given them power, but that power came with a condition. They could never stop fighting, never become predictable, never start following the mathematics of war. Now, she said, we find out what else we can do. Deep in the hollow reaches, the architect watched and smiled. It had been right about these humans. They were something new, something wonderful. A species that refused to accept limits, that believed so hard in themselves, The reality had no choice but to bend. The universe would never be the same, and the weakest ship in the fleet had become its greatest nightmare, not through superior technology or ancient alien gifts, but through something far more powerful: the stubborn, unshakable human refusal to lose. The Perseverance flew on, battered and scarred, and held together with determination and faith. She was still the oldest ship in the Navy. She was still crewed by misfits and outcasts, and she was still exactly where she belonged, at the front of the fleet, leading humanity into whatever came next, because that was what humans did. They believed, and they won.